Welcome to Computer Science. Today, we're going to be talking about the basics of computer programming. And this will be the first of several lessons that we'll have this semester, where we're going to learn more about computers, the ins and outs of computer programming, and also give you an opportunity to create your own computer program. My name is Michael Pamphlet, and I'll be working with you throughout the semester. Remy Carroll will also be working with you, and you'll hear more about him in later lessons. Before we get started, let me tell you a little more about myself. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and I attended two colleges to pursue my computer science and my computer engineering degrees. After college, then I started working with Microsoft, and that's where I am still working as a software engineer, specifically focused on testing the Office Education Solutions. Remy Carroll, which you'll hear from in later lessons, was born in Martinique. He also attended the University of Michigan, like myself, but he was focused on electrical engineering, and currently he works as an electrical engineer with the Xbox team at Microsoft. So let's get down to business. Today we're going to talk about computers and its parts, just to start things off. Now you may be very familiar with a lot of the things we talk about in this section, and that's perfectly fine, but it's important that we cover this information to make sure that everyone is on the same page. It's very important information that we need to really talk about computer programming. After that, then we're going to talk about, well, what exactly is a computer program? And then, well, from there, what is computer programming and how can we, you and I, create a computer program ourselves? In today's world, computers are all around us. Of course, we have laptops and desktop computers, but you also have computers in your pockets, like your mobile device or phone, and even MP3 players. There's hundreds of computers in each car that we drive. And there are computers and computer programs that we use in medical fields and other places where we need to solve complex problems about the body and the world. While there are many different types of computers, the parts of each computer remain largely the same. So let's talk about some of the key parts of every computer. So in the top left corner here, we see a motherboard, which is the skeleton, or pretty much the backbone of the computer, which keeps all of the different devices and pieces of the computer together and connected. Next to the motherboard, on the right and the left side, you see what we call input devices, like the mouse and the keyboard. These allow users like you and me to be able to communicate or send information to the computer. Next to the keyboard is what we call the processor, which is pretty much the brains of the computer. It does all the heavy computations and interpreting of instructions to allow the computer to do the things that it needs to do. And below the processor is a monitor, and this is one of many different kind of output devices which allow the computer to communicate back to us. The hard drive is a type of storage device, and this allows the computer to store information to be able to retrieve at any time it needs to, without us having to continuously send the information back to the computer. It'd be pretty challenging for us to wake up every day and have to remind ourselves of our name, address, and phone number. Well, we have memory for that, and this allows us to remember things. This is basically the same idea for computers. So one kind of storage device is a hard drive, but others include USB drives as well as CDs and DVDs, which store information that the computer can read and retrieve. Another type of storage device essentially is called memory, plain and simple. But memory, unlike a hard drive, is what we call short-term memory for a computer. When a computer shuts off, the information that the memory was using is gone. So it's really only there for a short amount of time for the computer to do processing and do things it needs to do. We'll talk more about memory as we go along. The screen in the bottom left corner is what we call an operating system, and this is essentially the way for the computer to interact with us through computer programs and be able to make the hardware or the actual physical parts of the computer to do things. We'll talk a lot more about computer programs and how it interacts with operating systems in the next slide. So in our last slide, we mentioned an operating system as an essential part of a computer. But what's the point? Why would you need this thing called an operating system? Well, let's talk more about computer programs. In general, a computer program is basically instructions that tell the computer what to do. In addition to that, a computer program can also tell the computer how to do things. You can imagine that a computer program by itself doesn't really know how to play a video game. So a computer program will give the computer instructions to understand how to create and operate a video game for us to play. Computer programs also give users ways to communicate with it. If you look at the diagram on the right side here, notice that you and me as users interact with computer programs. And you could think of some common computer programs that you use day to day, like Word or Facebook or Twitter, or any video games that you play. Well, they interact with, again, what we call the operating system, which is the computer's basic program to understand how to interact with other programs and with users. You've heard of Windows before. What about the Mac OS? Well, these are different kind of operating systems that sit on top of the actual computer. An actual computer we could basically call hardware, and we'll talk more about what hardware is as we go. Well, there are many different types of computer programs, and these are just a few different types that we can talk about right now. You're probably familiar with applications, which is basically any type of computer program that's on your PC or your laptop that you use. The example we're showing right now is Photoshop, which is a program that allows the computer and you to create pictures and edit pictures. But what about video games, where they're computer programs as well, and websites like Facebook and Twitter, as well as phone apps? Any type of computer program that you use on your phone essentially is a phone app. Well, we mentioned being able to communicate to a computer as a user. Well, we use input and output. So these devices, like a mouse and a keyboard, allow us to communicate to the computer. And the computer can communicate back to us with output devices like the monitor and the speakers. But what about computers communicating not just to us, but to our friends, and our phones being able to connect with our family across the world? Well, this is where the internet comes into play. And the internet is basically a network of computers communicating with each other. You can basically look at the picture that we have here in the bottom right corner and get the gist of it. Across the world, different computers are able to communicate with each other, and that allows us as users to communicate with each other. This allows computer programs like Facebook and Twitter to become very powerful. So basically the idea is that when you are accessing a website, you're really interacting with a computer program on someone else's computer. At this point, we've mentioned several different types of pieces of a computer. But let's talk about the difference between hardware and software, both very important different parts of the computer. So what's hardware? Well, that's basically the stuff that you can touch. Remember us talking about hard drives and memory, as well as input and output devices like the mouse and keyboard and the screen, as well as speakers. Well, then there's software. And this is essentially the stuff you can't touch, but still very important to a computer, like the operating system, or any other computer programs that you have on a computer, like games and websites. So what exactly is computer programming? Well, computer programming is basically writing the instructions for a computer to do something. So creating a computer program. And there's plenty of different people who create computer programs to allow computers to do specific things that they need in their lives or at their job. So there's game designers and web developers who, make the video games and the websites that we love and we use every day. But there's also people who need computers to do more complex things like IT professionals and office users. Also, people like scientists and researchers need to sometimes create or customize computer programs to be able to solve very complex problems. The point here really is that anyone can create a computer program. So in other words, anyone can be a computer programmer. And it may not be your job, but it may be something that can help you make your computer do things that's very useful for you. So, well, how do you ask for directions in Paris, France? Now, no, this isn't a trick question, but the answer is pretty simple. Give up? Well, you ask the question in French, right? If you're an American, if you go into Paris, France, chances are the local Parisians would better understand you if you spoke their language. And that's pretty much the idea of creating a computer program. You want to use the computer's language so that it understands you. This is what we call programming languages. And they're basically used to instruct a computer to do something in a way that the computer can understand. And there's many different programming languages out in the world that allow us to create many different kind of computer programs. Think of it this way. There's many different ways that you can say thank you in the world. Many different languages that you can use to achieve the same goal and communicate the same thing. But you may want to communicate it in a different way. And depending on where you are in the world, you may need to use a different language to communicate it. Some programming languages tell computers to do quick and simple tasks, like telling a computer to print "Hello World" on its screen. That's pretty simple. Now, other programming languages are more complex and allow you to do more things. For instance, telling a computer to print a map of the world with each country's population on it. That's a bit more complex, and you may need to use a more complex programming language for the computer to understand how to do that. So let's take two popular examples and talk a little bit more about, well, what we mean by telling the computer to do what we need it to do. Again, a computer program is basically a set of instructions, a list of things that we want the computer to do, and in many different ways, showing the computer how to do it. So what kind of instructions do these programs give to your computer? Let's talk about Facebook and Super Mario Brothers. Well, basically, for Facebook, you would need instructions to tell the computer how to create your profile and then be able to log in and view your profile. You need the computer program to also be able to let a user comment on a wall post, right? Or tag friends in photos, request friendship. Super Mario Brothers as a video game is also a computer program. And its instruction set is a bit different than Facebook because the things that we need it to do are different, like start a new game or resume a game. We need to step on Goombas and other characters. We need to defeat King Koopa at the end of a round. And we need to be able to pause and save the game. So let's do a recap. What we talked about today was, well, what exactly is a computer and the kinds of computers that we see in the world? Just a small example. And we also talked about some of the key parts of computers. And then we talked about, well, what exactly is a computer? And then, well, once we know what a computer is, then what exactly is computer programming? Which is basically creating computer programs. And then, well, how do we create a computer program? Well, we talked a little bit about programming languages and how there are many different kind of languages out there to achieve creating different type of computer programs. So the next time that we meet, we'll talk about a computer programming language called Scratch. And we'll use that throughout this semester to create our own computer program. See you then.